Welcome again to the Solid Signal Podcast. The date today, August 13, 2013. All of a sudden, the summer is beginning to show its true colors. And by true colors, I mean content providers and paid TV companies fighting in a way that hurts consumers. Now, if you've been reading the Solid Signal blog or listening to my podcast, you'll realize that I'm squarely in the corner of the paid TV companies in cases like this. Why? Because they're the ones who are trying to keep my bill low. Not just mine, but everybody's. And it's those content providers who are trying to get those triple-digit raises that just don't quite make sense to me. Wasn't that long ago that Dish shut off service to 52 stations in 36 markets. Why? Because they couldn't come to an agreement with Raycom Broadcasting over fees. The money that Dish pays to Raycom just so that they can provide that service to you. Seems like Raycom was asking too much money, and Dish said, well, we're not going to pay it. What happens in a case like this? Let me explain. The contracts between these companies are usually secret, but what we take it to understand is that there's some sort of clause that says if the companies can't come to some sort of agreement, and if they can't agree to at least extend the current contract, that it's over. And what that means is that a company like Dish can't carry that broadcasting anymore. So what they do is, in order to stay in compliance with the law, they stop carrying it. This means that Raycom or other content providers will say, oh, Dish cut it off. Dish was the one who blacked it out. When in fact all that Dish is doing is trying to stay compliant, not putting broadcasting on without paying for it. The good news is that Dish and Raycom did settle their differences. Of course, we'll never know quite how they did it, but all those channels are back on the air in those 36 markets. That's not the case for millions and millions of Time Warner customers in Los Angeles, New York City, and Dallas, Texas, where Time Warner has chosen not to renew a contract with CBS and is instead blacking out all CBS programming. That's broadcast CBS, Showtime, all the Showtime networks, and the CBS Sports Network until an agreement can be reached. We're well past 1 week already, and these are some pretty large markets. In fact, Los Angeles and New York are the home cities for CBS. This has got to be hurting them. Now, what makes this a really kind of interesting battle is that Time Warner Cable also is a content provider. They operate TWC Sportsnet. And TWC Sportsnet is the company that is charging DirecTV and others tons and tons of money for essentially one team, the Los Angeles Lakers. So when CBS comes back and says, hey, all we're asking for is a small fraction of the amount of money that you're charging DirecTV for one sports team, and we're on 24 hours a day with half a dozen channels, well, you kind of have to understand where they're coming from. But let me bottom line this for you. Just because CBS is right that Time Warner charges too much for one channel doesn't mean CBS deserves a raise. What it really means is that Time Warner should not be charging anywhere near the amount of money that they're charging for the Lakers, and they should definitely not be charging that same amount of money for the Dodgers channel that they're going to be launching fairly soon. In other words, this is not a case where two wrongs make a right. Time Warner is wrong in one way, CBS is wrong in another way, and really, who's getting hurt? You and me. It's a perfect example of the dangerous game that Time Warner is playing. Why? Because the longer this goes on, the more that they challenge CBS on CBS's choice of tactics, well, the more that's going to come back and bite them, well, you know where, as they begin to negotiate for the Dodgers channel next year and other TWC Sportsnet properties in the future. I can't help thinking this is just another lose-lose in a long series of bad decisions made by Time Warner Cable. Of course, the big picture here is that Time Warner Cable really is just working itself out of business. What do I mean? Well, CBS isn't going to get hurt. Why? Because if they don't make a good deal with Time Warner, people will just move to antennas. Folks, it's not a bad idea. If you live in an area served by antenna television, and almost 96% of people do, then you should pick up an antenna which ensures that you're not going to get caught by these kind of fee fights. I'm not saying Time Warner should just curl up and die here, quite the opposite. I applaud the fact that they're standing tall against these kind of price increases. But all it's doing at this point is making Time Warner's own base and their own arguments a little bit more wobbly, while convincing people that they didn't need cable in the first place. So, you see what I mean by a lose-lose? As I said, you as a consumer can always go out and buy an antenna, and that means you don't have to worry about this kind of thing, or switch to a provider that has a much better history of resolving these kinds of disputes quickly. Well, that's about it for the Solid Signal podcast for this week. I look forward to hearing your suggestions. Go to the Solid Signal blog at blog.solidsignal.com and click that orange Suggest a Topic button at the upper right-hand corner. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, have a great week.